guys very much for attending. We're going to have a real quick 20-minute question and answer session. If anyone has any questions, we'll turn on the house lights in a moment, and feel free to talk and ask us anything you wish, from the actors to John to myself. Can we introduce ourselves? You guys mind introducing yourselves, please? I'm Matthew Hahn, and I directed and wrote this play.
I am Dr Kani, an actor.
John Kani, not related to him, he's just my son.
I'm Umpile Mulusi,
An actor.
We were very fortunate that the Tempest from Cape Town, from the Baxter Theatre in Cape Town, was up in Stratford-upon-Avon, and it's traveling all around England right now. And it just so happened to set down in Richmond, and fortuitously, John and the rest of the actors have agreed to do this reading with us. I was in contact with John about 15 or 16 months ago, and told him the story of this of the play that I wanted to write, and he agreed to help me out. And so this was a great pleasure to work with the three of you guys on this. I'd just like to open up to the house for any questions that you might have, to myself or, again, to the actors. Historically, John is certainly the one that you want to ask questions about. Myself, I can tell you about my travels, and the young actors can tell you about how it was to read the script. Any questions? Yes, please. The question is, what are the future plans of the play? Well, it's very great that I have three actors here. My plan is to, this summer, take it back down to South Africa, to the Market Theatre in Johannesburg, and carry on doing what we're doing right now, basically, but fashioning it further into a play. This is a good framework, I think, and it works, and so I'll just carry on working with a handful of actors. Then ideally, we would take it to the Robben Island Museum and possibly do a small tour around Cape Town or Johannesburg. But when I was there this summer, I was working with the Robben Island Museum on this because they were able to give me the contact details for most of the ex-prisoners. So development more in Johannesburg, and then hopefully some sort of tour in South Africa. Yes, yes, please.
What made you want to do a project like this?
The question was, what made me want to do a project like this? I've always had a great admiration and fascination for the country of South Africa. I'm from the States, and I think there must be something parallel between two young democratic countries. And I've just always been fascinated with how South Africa is trying to work through its many difficulties into becoming a free and democratic country.
Can I ask John about the role of theatre in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa in particular? How important was theatre? You were working as an actor throughout the time of as the men signed the Bible, and throughout the time of the men were on Robben Island. What was the theatre's role in resistance and in the politics?
Let me just repeat that. So, Mark is asking, what was the role of the theatre in resistance during the apartheid government? Because John was working as an actor at the same time that the Bible was being signed in the mid-70s.
There is an African tradition of storytelling, which is actually a method of retaining the unwritten history, or the history that the white racist minority government did not want to write down. So our grandparents and great-grandparents handed down our history orally. And people would develop into seasoned and well-respected storytellers. And they would entertain in markets and in great traditional feasts. And that also, the stories were part of reflecting the society itself. So theater coming into our continent merged the two genres, the genre of storytelling and the Western concept of what theater is. And at the time in the late 30s and 20s in South Africa, when it became clear the intentions of the white settler was never to include the African in government or in any kind of social interaction, religious otherwise, the struggle since 1912, the formation of the ANC, began to be intensified. And within that, there was a cultural arm which also looked at mobilizing the people through the arts. Music, poetry, sculpture, painting, and dance, anything you did, and that could conscientize people about the state in which they lived under apartheid. It was almost impossible in the 60s and the 70s to think of doing No No Nanette. And people would think, why do you want to do Ray Cooney's Run With My Wife or No Sex With British Please? Why would you want to do that? Because artists decided also to stand up and be counted. We had been confronted by the wrath and the ruthless apartheid system, even as actors. I mean, as Dr. Verwoerd so poignantly said, in educating the Bantu, do not mislead him that upon the attainment of certain educational qualifications, the country's racial policies will disappear. Do not also mislead the author. And in Sculpture in the Education for Blacks, Dr. Verwoerd, the architect, also said, do not educate the black person outside this place of employment, nor educate him to create black Englishmen that would be an opposition to us in the future. So we grew up with that kind of resistance, and thus we found a platform which was almost the only difficult platform where the government could step in immediately. So when we created in 1972 Sizwe is Dead, which was a comment on the inhuman past laws that control the movement of blacks, the police came to see the play. And then they asked, where's the script? We didn't have a script because it was being improvised every evening. We couldn't afford the script because it would have been a document, and that document would have been evidence. So just to slide through 40 years, and in the 11th of February 1990, Nelson Mandela gets released. We saw it on television with you too. We were also trying to work out which one is Mandela. And then we saw Winnie holding an old man's hand. That gave us the idea that must be him. Because his picture, anything about him was banned in South Africa. And that system was successful in making all the young people not know who he looked like. Only the name, the myth, but the passion for freedom. So from there on, theatre has taken not another responsibility, but has broadened the base of its accountability. Of course, there are theatres that do all the West End success and the Broadway success passes. It's fantastic. South Africa is a non-racial, democratic, and non-sexist, please underline, country. And the constitution that the world envies. So we are happy to broaden our responsibility to use theatre as for entertainment, for informing, for education, and for mobilizing people. We're now dealing with, in our art, in our writing, with forgiveness. What's the difference between justice and forgiveness? Do we really forgive them? I don't know that we could be God and forgive, but we could understand and reconcile as if we've reconciled before. So we also deal with the environment, we also deal with the AIDS pandemic, we also deal with the challenges that are facing our new emerging democracy. We deal with poverty, with the empowering of women, the abuse of women and children. So these are the themes that are exciting us as writers in South Africa. And young people are also writing as this newfound world, which they are understanding. My only fear is that we're moving so fast that we might all suffer collective amnesia about the past. With my own children, when I say, do you know that in the 70s they said, oh, please. Can we move on? I mean, in my own house, I've become a reference library. My daughter only talks to me when she has an assignment of the issue, the reasons that led to the Rivonia trial, and she gives me boundaries. And don't start in 1652. Go straight to the trial. I'm trying to give a background. I'm being useful. So that the role of theatre, even today, is part of trying to build a nation, to talk about tolerance, reconciliation, rebuilding our own lives and our own country and our society. Or we do, of course, opt into the Tempest sometimes, provided we see in the Tempest a lesson which our people could learn in this great writer called Shakespeare.
Can I ask a question from the circle?
Please.
I'd like to start with an observation, really. It was lovely hearing Shakespeare spoken by non-English actors, first of all. And I'm picking up on your point, John, about an oral tradition we have, an oral tradition for storytelling. And I think that Shakespeare often in this country is seen as being more of a literary rather than as an oral person, whereas in fact, and that is a misconception, and it's a misconception that the RSC are struggling with at the moment as they try to get people to listen to, stand up, to participate in Shakespeare as a storyteller, not somebody that you have to have done an undergraduate degree in Cambridge to appreciate. So it's lovely hearing that sort of political aspect of his work coming from you guys. So my question, which I'm now getting to,
Good.
is that I wondered if in your time here, that you've been in the UK, with this Shakespeare play, you have noticed any difference between our ideas take perhaps over reverence towards Shakespeare and towards your own experience, which seems to be much more of a visceral, political experience, which I would say that that's what Shakespeare was as a writer. But I just wondered if any of you had noticed any differences between those two experiences.
For me, if it doesn't start with Once Upon a Time, I'm bored. Because I've got a lot of things to do. I'm very busy. But when my grandmother, because my grandfather had 3 wives and could not spell polygamy, all we knew was Once Upon a Time, gather around children. So I found that Shakespeare, for me, was about that. Really, it was about that. I mean, there's this man who has problems in Milan. He and his daughter get thrown out. I don't know why. They end up on an island on the coast of Africa and do exactly what the colonialists do. Befriend the native, understand where he eats, where the water is, bring him in, help him build the number 10 for you, and then oppress him. That's what Prospero does. That's a simple understanding. But when we perform in South Africa, people, I remember when Anthony Shea did Titus and Andronicus directed by Greg Doran at the Market Theatre. Some of the audiences that watched the play very quietly, very engrossed in it. And they said to me, because I was the artistic director then, they said, "This is a very good play." I'm telling you, the violence and the tapestry of reconciliation. Has this guy written many other plays? That, for me, to take the awe, the information, the baggage, the classic, the history of who this man is. Africa doesn't care about that. Africa cares about the story you are telling now and what does it mean to me. Now, when we are traveling and in England, the first kind of sensitivity was, we take the Tempest to the home of Shakespeare. The people there have studied, the people in England have seen each one of them more than 5 productions. Ooh, are we going to sound right? Are we going to keep the iambic pentameter? Are we going to do the inflections? And our director says, just tell the story and get off the stage. What we have experienced is incredibly unbelievable. People have understood, people have warmed to the story. Some have said, now I understand. Some even say, I cannot understand why this interpretation was never done by us. You know, and some have said, why don't you reverse it? That Prospero arrives as Ushaga in this tiny little island that is troublesome called England, Great Britain, and oppress all of them. And one time he goes back to Africa, leaving them. But we've been really well received, and it's not an interpretation really as if we've adapted, we've changed not one line, except that it's what we think it means to us. We see when Prospero says, the rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. When Prospero says to his brother who's exiled him for so long, I forgive thee. That has resonance with the truth and reconciliation in our country. When Caliban in the beginning says, this island's mine, in our country you hear viva, yeah, it is your land. So even if we took Macbeth, we took Measure for Measure, we took Julius Caesar, we took Romeo and Juliet to the township. And this young man said, I see, I know what this play is about now. Romeo's father is ANC. Juliet's parents are IFP and they are Zulu. These kids have no chance. That was it. These kids have no chance. I would have given him an A+.
So yours.
This is for all three of the actors. Is there any particular Shakespeare speech or anything in plays that you yourselves or your favourites that means something to you personally?
Just to reiterate, is there a Shakespearean play, a piece from the Tempest, do you mean, or any of the plays that resonate with the actors here?
I'll be very quick. In 1959, my introduction to Shakespeare was Julius Caesar obhalwe Shakespeare waguqulelwa esiXhoseni ku-W.B. Mdlele. That was Julius Caesar in Xhosa. So I read this play with my teacher, and I came to this brilliant passage that says, awundixolele wena gada lophisayo ukuba ndilulame ndithambe kwezi zikrelemnqa. Later, I found the copy of Julius Caesar, the English version, and I read the same passage, oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, to be meek and gentle unto these butchers. I felt Shakespeare had failed Mdlele in his translation. That was for me as a young comrade, a young combatant and patriot, that I was prepared to kill. And I had told myself to kill for liberation is not a sin, it's like a holy war, it's a jihad. That was our upbringing. And when I say, every time I see my mothers and my fathers in the township being kicked and dehumanized, I would ask God to forgive me for the sin I'm about to commit.
Follow that.
Me personally, I haven't been doing Shakespeare much. I think I've started Shakespeare about 2-3 years ago from drama school, and I because where I come from, especially in the black community, there isn't much of Shakespeare. So we do South African plays mostly. And so I wanted to do Shakespeare. And so 2 years ago, I joined this center called the Actors Center in Johannesburg. And that was the only place I could do Shakespeare. But even for me today, I cannot code, you know. I'm still falling in love with the language, and I'm still trying to understand it. And I'm still trying to make it a piece of me. I'm just loving the language, but to say a code, maybe 2 years' time.
Fully agree. I feel that if you find a quote that you like, it has some sort of resonance and some sort of meaning in your own life at that particular time. And what Shakespeare writes, being universal, it's very deep as well. And I feel that it comes with age. You know, I have to accumulate more experience to be able to take such a monologue or a sonnet or an epilogue and relate it to my own life. I'm 24. And here we're talking about butchering people and how am I doing? But I think I could answer your question in saying that characters that Shakespeare writes about, and they're traits, they're character traits that would relate to my life. Hamlet. No matter, I mean, as a young man, no matter how brave you think you may be, you are still scared of what you are possible of doing, your own possibilities, what your own potentials. There is no thing of fearing fear. You know fear. And to be or not to be, that is the question, whether to nobly in the mind, to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. That speech, and Hamlet himself being just faced with all these problems, with his mother marrying, and all those things that happen in your life, but not that extreme, but being in a position where you can't make a decision and you're scared of acting out. Just that internal emotional turmoil that he has, I relate to as a young man.
For me, the important thing about the Bible is that it pays tribute to all or most of the men that gave so much for the democracy and freedom we're enjoying in South Africa. There's a tendency to put Mandela in the center and call everything Mandela. In my life, I have never met a man so humble. I mean, I thank my lucky stars and my ancestors that I go to see him anytime I want to, and I sit down and he talks. He's a leader that have never used the personal pronoun. Always the people, the movement, the government, the ANC, the people of our country. And thus he would be the first to say, it's not about me. Going through some of the quotations which we did not even use here, people like Joe Gardy, people like Mobs Khan, who was a very personal good friend of mine. We talk about him here, that he disappeared. I even know the day he left, because he said he was going to town to buy some more vegetable to sell in his store. I have looked for Mobs for 15 years. And finally I found out that he's dead. So 1990, Mandela's release and the return of the exiles was the biggest pain for the people of South Africa, who had hoped all their lives that my son is in exile, he will come back when the others come back. It was only during the TRC process that hundreds actually never left, are buried on the borders in some farm somewhere. So people had to go to the spot where people were buried, their families, to take a piece of ground and take it home. So to pay tribute to these men in this way, Matthew, it's one of the greatest sort of salute to the struggle for humanity of the South African people. And I know that I just have a feeling this is going to become a very good piece of art.
Anything else? Yes, please, in back.
I'm just wondering, what was it like to be a fellow in Susan's production in 1987, and what did that production mean to you, to South Africa?
In 1987, Janet Suzman and I did Othello. And that was the first black Othello in South Africa. We knew we were going to be in trouble. We knew. We had the cast and everybody, and we were rehearsing, and we opened, and the police came. It was an incredible experience working with South African actors who come from different walks of life. You know, while white people oppressed black people, that's a very broad generalization, which sometimes is very dangerous. Because there were people like Joe Slovo who were white and not oppressing me, but fighting for me. You know, people like Bram Fischer and all the others, I mean, Joel Joffe and the others who were in the struggle. So when you work with white South African actors, there's a sort of a situation whereby, can he play the bard? Can he play Shakespeare? Has he been trained to do Shakespeare? you know. And we struggled a little bit in the beginning because the director would tell me about, Lord Olivier at this particular moment, he went into himself and gave, and I think, I don't know who this guy you're talking about. Let's deal with this. So we performed the play at the Market Theatre. And one day on my way back, I was stopped by the police. I was taken for detention. And the security police looked at me and they said, in page 11, it says here, he takes her into her arms. You kissed her on her lips. It doesn't say so yet. Because it was the first, not second time really, that a black man would kiss a white person on stage. Page 17, they embrace. You kissed her again for 14 seconds. Page this, I could see your tongue moving in and out. I'm sitting in this office being interrogated, and I'm smiling because I'm thinking, he read the play. He read the play. So I says, you know what, sir? You know what, sir? When Laurence Olivier, very, very, very good actor in England, and Maggie Smith did this play, Mr. Olivier had to put black polish all over his body, the face and ears, so they couldn't sort of snuggle. Because each time they did that, Mr. Olivier would leave a black smudge on the white skin and makeup of Maggie. I don't have that problem, sir. That cost me another 2 hours because he wasn't amused. But it was an incredible production. I remember one night we heard that there was going to be a massive picketing of people coming to buy tickets and then walk out when I kissed Desdemona. And I just said to the actress, listen very carefully, if you feel it's uncomfortable, step out. I'll follow you. 'Cause your people mind, mine don't. But it was an incredible experience. It was filmed by Channel 4 and well received in England and in America as well.
Great. So unfortunately it's 4 o'clock and we
Yeah,
have to clear the
show
stage. These guys have to rest their voices for their show tonight. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come and see us.